Okay, so let's start. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jose Cervera. I hope you can all hear me. Welcome to this webinar on household statistics organized by the International Telecommunication Union. The webinar of today is about household surveys to collect data on access and use of ICT by households and individuals. Most of you probably are familiar with this methodology. Many of you have probably received a questionnaire from the ITU to collect data from your country. So this webinar intends to help you in the collection of this data and increase the quality of the data that we receive in ITU. We'll describe later what we do with the data and where you can find them. So my name is Jose Cervera. I'm a senior project manager at the ITU, and I would like to welcome you by starting to present to discuss why it is important to collect statistics about ICT access and use by household individuals. So maybe some of you are familiar with the latest developments in what refers to the Global Digital Compact. So the United Nations General Assembly in September last year approved the Pact for the Future, which includes a mention as an annex to the Global Digital Compact, which is a very high-level agenda on connecting everyone. So this Global Digital Compact mentions the principle of universal and meaningful connectivity. What is that? Universal and meaningful connectivity is not just connecting everyone, but it's about connecting everyone with quality, with access to the relevant devices, with skills for benefiting of the technologies. So it is not just about deploying technologies, deploying infrastructure, but about providing all the other elements that can help people benefit from the technology. So this concept of universal meaningful connectivity is very much related to indicators about the access by households and the use by individuals. So that's why we are promoting the implementation of surveys to households that collect this kind of data. The ITU has set standards about this, and we will review today recommendations on how to carry out these surveys. I would like to mention that household surveys are not the only source of data about ICT. There are also administrative registers which are collected by the telecom regulators in the countries, from the mobile network operators, from internet providers. So administrative data are also there. Big data are also there. So, for instance, mobile phone records can be useful for collecting data, but still household surveys are not only the golden standard for collecting data from households and individuals, but also the only way of collecting data about those people that do not leave digital traces. So this is important, especially if we have in mind the principle of leaving no one behind in connecting everyone. So I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues for a presentation. My colleague Nathan Menton will present the agenda, and all of us here. So floor over to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Jose Luis. And thank you to everybody for joining us today for this webinar on ICT household statistics. As introduced, I'm Nathan Menton. I'm a statistician with the ITU's ICT Data and Analytics Division. And this week we have divided the content of these webinars into two. So tomorrow we'll focus on the actual submission of the ITU questionnaire, which many of you received on Monday. We'll go through the information that's required by ITU and also how to complete the submission using the online platform. But today we'll take a bit of a step back and explore some of the best practices in data collection, what you as data providers should consider when designing household surveys and processing results. So joining Jose Luis and myself today is our colleague Nehal Desai. She will provide an overview of the ITU Data Hub, where the ITU publishes the data provided by countries. Following that, Jose Luis will share some guidelines on planning statistical operations and also best practices in survey design. These are really essential for generating meaningful results from the surveys. He will also discuss some practical recommendations for data collection. And then I will wrap up with a look at processing our raw data results. Throughout the session, you're welcome to post questions in the chat, and we will respond in real time as possible. We will then have a dedicated question and answer session moderated by my colleague, Martin Schaffer. Just a few housekeeping notes. As you noticed, the webinar is being conducted in English, but we encourage you to ask questions in the chat in the language you are most comfortable with. For non-English questions, we may need to follow up after the webinar, but rest assured they will not be overlooked. We also ask as usual that all participants mute their microphones unless they are speaking. And you'll also have noticed that the webinar is being recorded. This can be made available on request after the webinar itself. And all presentations will be posted on the event website. So with that, I think I hand it over to Nehal to get started with our demonstration.
Thank you, Nathan. And hi, everyone. I am Nehal Desai, and I am a part of the ICT data and analytics team at ITU. So before we go on to the data collection methodology, today we will see a quick presentation on ITU Data Hub, a user-friendly platform that serves as a one-stop place for all ICT statistics and regulatory information, offering a wealth of data. ITU Data Hub highlights the richness of the extensive data collected by the member states and by ITU as well. It's freely accessible to everyone. So upon entering the URL, you will be landing onto the home page that is tailored to your location. So in our case, it's Switzerland, as you see here. You can see here the core set of indicators at a glance for that country. You can see the connectivity, affordability, and some regulatory information. If you click on one of the indicators, say, for example, one of our key indicators, individuals using the internet, we will explore the detailed data specific to Switzerland. So here you can see on the overview page, thematic map color-coded to visualize the data across geographic regions. On the next icon, you can see the data evolved over the years for that specific country, as well as for world, regions, groups, and for all countries, the data, the value, and that for that specific year. One of the key points here I would like to highlight is that beside the value, you can see a small icon over here, which gives you the information on the source for this data. As you can see, for Switzerland, it comes from the National Statistic Office. For example, if you go down, for example, if we see Angola, you can see it's an ITU estimate. So this also allows you to know the data availability for this indicator, whether it's from the official source or it's an ITU estimate. If you you can also drill down this data by and look at the disaggregated data by location. For example, here when we clicked on the location, you can see the urban-rural gap. In Switzerland, it's very low, as you can see. You can see the data by age scope. We can see here that almost all the individuals aged 15 to 74, where almost no one is offline. However, for the older age group, the data looks different. Only 80% of the individuals are using the internet. Similarly, you can see the data by gender, where you can see the data for internet use by male and female. You can see more men use than women are using the internet. You can also download this data on this when you click on this icon. We have also given a little search bar at the top left over here. So if you are aware of any specific indicator, or if you are looking for any indicator, you can avoid the navigation. You can just type whatever you are looking for. Say, for example, individuals, and you type and you can select that indicator. If you can also use the comparator on the very right hand side on the top here, you can compare either between two economies or economy and a region or between an economy and a group. For example, if we type here, say Belgium, we can look the data for both the countries, Switzerland and Belgium. As you can see here, you can see a quick line chart. The data evolved over the years. You can see here a nice representation of the bar chart for the overall use as well as by disaggregation. This is for the landing page, but we can quickly go on to the all the different tabs over here that are given on the top right. So if you see if we click on the Data Explorer, we have enhanced a new feature, which is this download PDF button, as you can see here on the right-hand side, which allows you to download the country profile for that country profile in a PDF format on the core indicators on ICT access and use. As you can see, you have affordability, connectivity indicators. So this is very useful feature for decision-making purpose. If you click on the next tab, which is the indicator catalog, as it goes by its name, we have the list of all the indicators here. The idea was to bring all of the data under one roof. So besides the qualitative data, we have integrated the besides the quantitative data, we have integrated the qualitative insights as well from for the regulatory information collected by our sister division, Regulatory Market Environment Division. So here you can also navigate through the topics like international connection charges. As you can see here, the prices, international connectivity prices, and many more indicators, which is vital for policy making. If last year we enhanced the data hub with a new feature that is advanced data query with custom layout. So if you click on the data query tab, you can you can customize your query as per your needs. So you can select as many indicators as you like. For example, if I'm interested in individuals with ICT skills by area, I'm selecting, say, for example, information and data literacy area. I am interested in say individuals using a mobile cellular phone or individuals using the internet by the type of activity. And I can select as many economies as you like. You can either search, say, for example, I am looking for Brazil's, and you can also select the years. For example, I am selecting from 2022 to 2024, apply the filters, and on the right-hand side, you can see the data as per your needs. So you can select the indicators from here, where you can select what are you interested for. Like, say, for example, individuals using the internet by type of activity. Here you have all the activities listed. If you're interested in purchasing or ordering goods or services, you also have the disaggregation available by age. You can see here in Brazil that more than 50% of the individuals aged 15 to 74 are performing this activity in the last 3 months. You can also see by location, the data by gender, whether it's more female or male. In Brazil, as we see, it's almost similar for this type of activity. You can select the indicators. You can download this data. Either you can only download the current view, or you can download all the indicators that you have customized your query for, and resulting in a zip file containing a CSV file. So this is how you can customize your query. In the About tab, you can see the disclaimers and terms to use this data. You also have all the information related to the 3 data collection type that ITU does for on ICT household indicators, world telecom indicators, and on ICT prices. You have the manual, the handbook, the definitions, and the methodology related to all the data collection. So before I conclude, I'll quickly want to inform you that we have also integrated some of the thematic dashboards in the Data Hub. As you can see here, we have the Universal and Meaningful Connectivity Dashboard. We have integrated into the Data Hub to have a more interactive experience. The design is similar to the data hub for a seamless experience throughout the website. The work is still ongoing. We continue to develop the data hub with new visualization tools. As you can see, we will soon have the ICT price dashboard over here. So for more context and insights, improved data presentation, and many more to make the dissemination as smooth as possible for all our users. So we encourage you to engage with this platform, and thank you for joining us. I'll now pass it over to Jose for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michal, for the presentation of the dashboard. So we hope that you will play with it to find the data submitted by your country and how they are disseminated. So I would like to move now to the presentations about how to implement household surveys. So many of you may be familiar with it, but it's always good to recall. So let me just share my presentation. Is it okay? Can you see it? Yeah. So the first part of the presentation, well, there are three presentations in a row. So first one is about a standard to describe a statistical operation, which is called the GSBPM. The GSBPM stands for the Generic Statistical Business Process Model, and it is a standard to describe any kind of statistical operation. So it can be used for household surveys as well. So So what is the GSBPM model? So it is a model that describes every phase in a statistical operation in a very clear way, in very sequential way. But you have you need to have in mind that there are some iterations in some of the phases. So, for instance, you all know that when you are processing the data, sometimes you have to go back to editing the data to correct mistakes or improve estimates. So the process is not linear as it is shown in the diagram, but they are usually iterations. So I would like to insist very much on a first phase, which is called specifying the needs, which is not always well considered by statisticians, because it involves discussing not just with your colleagues in the statistical office that process parts of the data, but usually it involves discussing with people from other institutions that will be using the information. So this phase of specifying the needs is very important to decide the scope of the survey, the indicators have to be produced, the ways to disseminate the information, and also it is important for you to know how the data will be used for policymaking. So very briefly, the GSBPM model has the following steps. So first is specifying the needs. So understanding what is necessary to satisfy the information needs of the users. Then designing and building the different elements of the survey. This includes very well-known phases like building a questionnaire, but it also includes very technical phases like building a sampling frame from which the sample will be selected, designing the data collection systems, the data entry systems, etc., before you go to the fourth phase of collecting the data on the field, which usually it's by sending interviewers to households or collecting data from telephone surveys, or allowing households and individuals to fill in web forms and so on. We'll see that later in detail. Then we have I would say the traditional statistical processes of integrating the data, cleaning the data, validating the results, analyzing them to compile indicators, and this usually has lots of iterations until we have quality estimates. And finally, we have the two last steps of disseminating the data, usually in different formats, starting from press releases to very detailed micro data sets. And finally, do not forget a phase of evaluation of the different steps in order to improve continuously the statistical operations. So this GSBPM model has been adopted by many statistical offices as a way to describe all the steps, to clarify responsibilities, to understand better where we can have quality issues in the process. So I encourage you to check the statistical wiki of the UNECE. You have the link on the slide that we will share later. But if you just type GSBPM, you will find the model and how to use it for statistics. So of course, we can group these activities into preparatory, implementation, and final activities, and we'll briefly describe this for household surveys on ICT access and use. So again, regarding the first phase, which is about identifying information needs, it's very important that you consult with your different stakeholders on the plan for the surveys. And who are these stakeholders? The stakeholders include those that will be using the data, but also those that will be financing the data collection survey. So in the field of ICT statistics, usually we have policymakers in the country, which include the ministries for telecommunication or digital development. It includes also the telecommunication market regulatory agencies, but it includes also the private sector, for instance, the ICT industry associations or market study providers. So these are private sector users. And of course, you have researchers from universities, think tanks, and other academic institutions. So it is very important to understand the different needs of each one of them in terms of the data. Probably for a minister, it is enough to have an executive summary of the publication with the most important trends. But for academic researchers, it would be more important to have microdata at the household and individual level, anonymized, of course, so that they can carry out more detailed analysis. So it is very important that this first phase that you understand what kind of results the users are expecting from the survey. But also here, it is important to discuss who will be financing the survey. We'll get back to that issue later. How do you carry out this consultation? You can have open events with the users, or you can have more formalized forums, like working groups on ICT statistics in national statistical councils. So usually statistical laws provide for user-producer forums, and we encourage you to check if there is, and if not, to promote working groups having users and producers sitting together to discuss these operations. The next process is designing the survey. So there is a manual that the ITU has disseminated in all the official UN languages, which is called the Manual for Measuring ICT Access and Use by Household Individuals, where you have all the different recommendations on standards to be used for the design. So what is important is that you do not reinvent the wheel. Many countries have already carried this kind of surveys quite successfully. We have many data which are comparable, as Nehal showed in the dashboard. So it is important that you check these tools for designing your survey in order to facilitate the processes. Very importantly, one of the main decisions is whether to carry out what we call a standalone survey, so a survey specifically addressing the issues of access and use of ICT by household individuals, or if you decide to include some questions in other existing surveys, I mean, what we call the survey vehicles. So first, it is important to check if some administrative surveys can provide information about ICT in the country, ICT adoption in the country. For instance, you can think of subscription data for mobile networks, but this will not give you all the detailed breakdown which is necessary for understanding digital gaps. So probably you will decide to either include some questions in an existing household survey or to do a standalone survey. We'll discuss later about this, what are pros and cons, but you can imagine that if you have a standalone survey, you will be able to have much more detail and much more relevant breakdowns, but it will be more costly. While if you include a few questions in other surveys, like a labor force survey, like a demographic and health survey, like any other social survey, you will not be able to include as many questions as you would like, but instead you will have a lower cost of the survey. So this is a key issue in the design process. We also recommend you to adhere as much as possible to existing standards. These include standards on the definition of indicators to be calculated, but also on the different breakdowns for household and individual categories. On the slide, you have a few ones on occupation breakdowns, on education level breakdowns, and so on, that you should use, and of course to harmonize it across the household surveys in your country. In the building phase, it is important to define the concepts and tools that will be used. We'll give more details later about this, but this includes defining the survey scope. So what will be the target population to be surveyed? What are the statistical units to be considered? What are the requirements for classifying or breaking down the data by different categories for household individuals? It will also include the definition of the survey design, so how you will select the sample and how you will collect the data, and any other process. We'll go through that later. I would like to insist a bit more on the financing of surveys, because that's a crucial issue in many countries that do not have yet implemented such survey. So, as I said, a good survey is a costly statistical operation, because it requires usually not just cost in terms of processing the data, but also in terms of moving the interviewers to go to the households, and that's the most important cost of a household surveys in general. There are some consideration about the efficiency of different data collection models, which have implication on cost. So, for instance, collecting data by phone is much less expensive than visiting the households, but then you have more risk of non-response, for instance. So I would like to mention a very important fact that I briefly mentioned at the introduction, which is the Global Digital Compact. So you have on the slide an excerpt of one of the agreements of this Global Digital Compact, which is developing and undertaking national digital inclusion surveys with data disaggregated by income, sex, age, etc. So this Global Digital Compact, which is a very high-level agreement at the UN General Assembly level, it stresses the importance of carrying out these surveys. So this is a very good advocacy tool for statisticians to pledge for financing these surveys. There is much discussion about the cost of connecting everyone and how much it costs to deploy infrastructure, to maintain such infrastructure, to provide skills and devices to everyone. But how can you plan that if you don't have the necessary data? So before any large investments at the country level about developing the ICT infrastructure, I think it's very important to justify the implementation of surveys to support evidence-based policymaking. So with the Global Digital Compact, you have a very good advocacy tool that you can use when you meet your stakeholders, especially Ministry of Finance, which is at the end who provides financing at the national level for the statistical operations, or also to discuss it with potential donors. So I think this is a very good news for statisticians, the decision in September 2024 to adopt this Global Digital Compact, and we should use it to justify financing these surveys. It is important when we design the processes to consider the staff selection and training. There are many different types of staff involved in a survey. It includes people that will manage the processes. It includes IT specialists for computer systems, for developing data entry, data editing, and other IT processes, but it will also include field workers like interviewers and supervisors, which have to be trained in that. And we have technical processes which require statistical skills, like for data editing, data manipulation. And finally, we also need communication specialists and analysts to produce reports. So when you plan for the survey, consider all these elements and their roles in the different phases of the GSBPM. So this has a cost, of course. So when you plan for the financing of the survey, don't forget to include the capacity building of the staff. The ITU provides training on household surveys. There is an open and free course at the ITU Academy. We'll give later the reference. So we really encourage you to go through this course before embarking in this survey. Some resources can be centralized. Some other can be decentralized. For instance, it is probably the Central Statistical Office, the National Statistical Office, that will be doing the data entry and data processing. But in some countries, the collection of data at the field level is outsourced to specialized companies. It is very important when you think of the training to include as a trainer's experienced staff. I think it's very important to involve very experienced interviewers in the design of the training, especially because ICT surveys are complex. We'll see later some of the concepts which are difficult to be understood by respondents or to be explained by interviewers. Of course, it is important to monitor the staff performance in terms of collecting the data. A common issue in household surveys recently is the increase of non-response. It is increasingly difficult to find individuals that are willing to respond to surveys. This happens in all countries, so it is very important to have the skilled interviewers to get responses in an unbiased way by the population. You can also find useful the ITU manual to develop the training and procedures manual for your own survey. So if you use the GSBPM to describe the different steps and you use the ITU manual for the definition of concepts, you will have, I would say, more than half of the work done for preparing the manuals. So just to conclude on the GSBPM use, try to use it not just for your planning, but also for documenting the processes. So when users will be using the data for policymaking, they need to know how the data have been collected and processed. So if you have clear reports describing the different processes with the GSBPM, it will be easier. It will be even more comparable between countries. At the ITU, we do not only collect data from the country, we also collect metadata about how the data were produced. So if the metadata are correctly described using the different GSBPM concepts, it will be much easier for all of us to analyze the data. I would like to insist very much on the dialogue with the users of the data at the very beginning, but also at the final phase of dissemination and evaluation of the tool. And remember that in the case of ICT statistics, the main users are the ministries for digital development and the telecom regulators, but you have also to think of the private sector. So with this, I would like to conclude the first presentation and move to the second part, which is about best practices in household survey design. All this material is available in the ITU manual. So if you need more detail, please go to that manual. You will find all the information. We are working on a revision. Last edition was 2020. So we are now working on revision that will include many developments thanks to the experiences of countries in collecting such data. So I will give recommendations on the design and build phases of the survey. So of course, it is important to standardize all these the processes across the different household surveys in your country. Most statistical offices have a very valid experience in collecting data about living condition surveys, poverty surveys, literacy surveys, etc. So this is a survey which is quite new compared to others, but you can use your experience in designing these surveys. So what are we going to discuss in this part of the presentation? We will examine some concepts of survey design, like the scope and coverage, target populations and survey frames, statistical units, and sample design and selection. This is covered by one of the chapters, chapter 7 of the manual. And I would like to mention that the UN, the United Nations Statistical Commission, is working on the revision of a handbook of surveys on individual households, including emerging approaches. So there is a draft which is being discussed, and it is important to check it for new developments, as I mentioned, in terms of new systems for data collection, using new technologies, using multiple frames, and so on. Okay, so what is the survey scope? We have to keep in mind what we could call an inclusivity principle of leaving no one behind. So remember that we are trying to monitor the progress towards universal and meaningful connectivity. So this principle of universality means to connect everyone. And we know that in many countries, there are hard to reach populations in terms of ICT access. For instance, we have very remote areas which are difficult to cover with infrastructure, or we have subpopulations which are not adopting at the same pace the technology. So all these different subpopulations that have a risk of being excluded of the benefits of technology should be considered for the design of the surveys. So our recommendation is to include all households in a country where at least one member is age 5+. So I would say that this is like all households in a country, including urban and rural households. I mean, when countries face difficulties in terms of budget, sometimes they are tempted to collect data only from easy areas, I would say. So for instance, not covering very remote areas, because that's a very high cost, very high difficulty. But we encourage the countries to collect data from everyone. In some countries, the scope is limited to households living in private dwellings. So for instance, people living in collective establishments like barracks, labor camps, prisons, or hospitals are not included. This is a generalized recommendation, and in any case, it should be aligned with the practices of your country for other household surveys. That's for household, but for individuals, we encourage countries to collect data from all individuals age 5 and plus. This may be a difficulty because in some countries, the legal provisions for statistics do not allow for collecting data from children. But given the increasing adoption of technology by children precisely, it is important to understand how they use it. It is also important to understand that because of child online protection measures. So if we want to protect our children from the risk of ICT, we need to understand how they are using it. So of course, it will be difficult to collect the data directly from the children, but in such cases, parents can probably answer for them. This, as I said, is restricted or is constrained by the legal provisions for the statistical law in the countries. There are, of course, issues of language limitations in countries where there are many languages. So a good practice, but this is generalized in all household survey, is to have several versions of the questionnaire in the most spoken countries, and even to have interviewers who are native in the different languages. So that's the scope of the survey. And what we want to ensure is that the coverage of that scope is as high as possible. So the coverage is the degree to which the units in that scope are present in the survey frame. We'll see what is the survey frame. And in mathematical terms, it means that they have a non-zero probability of being selected in the sample. So for instance, if from the design, the individuals living in collective dwellings are excluded, their probability of being selected in the sample will be zero. Okay, so that's something that we have to consider when we will calculate or we will define the sampling selection scheme. So if we are talking about household, we need to have a definition of what is a household. So that's not so easy. You know probably that statistical offices have different definitions of what is a household. So in general, it is a group of people living together. So they share accommodation. They may be or may not be related to each other by family links. And there is usually criteria, which is that they make at least common provision for food. There are many different types of households. This is also evolving in many countries. We have an increasing presence of single individual households. So these are particularly complicated. And one important thing is that the UN Statistical Commission is precisely debating about how to estimate the number of households in a country, because in general, in a country you have a register of persons, but you don't have necessarily a register of households. You have a register of dwellings, you have a register of persons, but not necessarily of households. So the estimation of the number of households may be challenging, and this is one of the difficulties that we usually encounter when calculating some of the indicators which are expressed as ratios where the denominator is the total number of households. So what we recommend is to refer to the UN Statistical Division's recommendations for population housing censuses. So in order to design the data collection, we need to have a survey frame. So a survey frame is a listing of the units that will be selected for the sample. Okay, we naturally talk about samples because having exhaustive collection of data is a very extremely costly operation. So censuses, so exhaustive collection of data, only happen every 10 years. Even in some countries, there are difficulties to carry these censuses with such regularity. But in general, there is no updated list of all peoples, all households, all dwellings at any moment of time. So the quality of the data will depend very much on the quality of the survey frame, which is this long list of individuals from where we will extract the sample. So ideally, this frame contains all members of the target population, but this in practice is very difficult because people are moving, new households are being created every day, people are living and dying, and new dwellings are being built. So it is a very dynamic thing. So statistical offices have to devote many efforts to have an updated survey frame. So what can be used as a survey frame? Some countries have a very complete register of persons. For instance, my own country, Spain, has a real-time register of population because it is managed both by the municipalities and the statistical office. So whenever one person moves from one place to another, immediately it is deleted from the original place and included in the new place, and the applications are avoided. So, but this is a system which does not exist in many countries. Some countries have electoral rolls, but then this only covers a part of the population with right to vote. So minors probably will not be included. We can have also a population census data file, but as I mentioned before, population censuses are carried out usually every 10 years. So between census periods, the survey frame may be outdated. List of dwellings, in many countries, that's a main list for extracting surveys, but remember that in a dwelling, we may have several households, and always dwellings are being built and renovated and destroyed all the time. So keeping an updated list of dwellings may be also a very expensive operation. And finally, what many countries have is a master sampling frame. Okay, we'll describe it more in detail. So a master sampling frame is a very large sample which is used for several surveys. So in general, the statistical offices use a population housing census as a starting operation, and from there they create lists for extracting samples representative for households. But this is done in what is called a multi-stage sampling, and this requires more than one frame. I'll try to explain that graphically in the later slides. So how do usually statistical offices implement these survey frames? So first is stratifying the population. So a stratum is a subpopulation which is as homogeneous as possible. The reason behind stratification is that if a population is very homogeneous, you don't need a very large sample to make inference about it. So imagine that we are collecting information from all individual households. So probably all individual households are more similar than if we start considering households of different sizes. So probably if one stratum is the individual, the single individual household, we probably can have a smaller sample than if we consider the full population. So defining strata is usually done by defining sub-regions, for instance, administrative regions of the country, but then we divide between urban and rural areas. Maybe we can also divide by size of the municipalities. We can also use income groups. For instance, some countries in Latin America, in particular Colombia, has a classification of all households by income levels, and they use it as a stratification for household surveys. So remember, strata have to be as homogeneous as possible. So the more homogeneous, the lower the size, the smaller the size of the sample, so the lower the cost for collecting data. So from each one of the strata, the second phase is selecting what we can call clusters. So a cluster is, for instance, villages, enumeration areas, neighborhoods, or different smaller units, and these clusters are will be selected at random. In this case, the clusters have an impact on the quality of the estimates, because a cluster usually has somehow similar households. So if a cluster is a rich neighborhood, then you will have probably rich households living there. So probably they will show a similar behavior. So selecting clusters is a way of decreasing the cost because the interviewer is sent to an area of the city instead of moving around the city. But at the same time, it increases the bias of the estimates. So there is always a trade-off to be discussed between the cost of the survey by doing a cluster sampling and the bias of the estimates. In any case, it is a common practice to use clusters as what we call primary sampling units. So that means that the first phase of sampling will be extracting a list of clusters, a sample of clusters. Then the next phase is that in each cluster, we will select households. So the national statistical offices usually, they make an effort of having a complete listing of dwellings and households in each one of these primary sampling units. So if a cluster is defined as a neighborhood, maybe all neighborhoods have something like, let's say, 1,000 households. So it is possible to have an updated list of that neighborhood. So if the population census was taken like 5 years ago, we use this population census, plus we send interviewers to update the list of households in this survey so that we can do a next extraction of a sample of households, okay? So from this cluster, we will select some households, okay? And these usually, I mean, the golden standard is to use some kind of random sampling, which means that we know before selecting the sample, what is the probability of each household to be in the sample. This is very important. Some countries use non-probabilistic methods, such as random roots or snowball sampling. These methods, while they look random in the sense that you don't know who will be in the sample, are not probabilistic samples because you don't know in advance what is the probability of a household or individual to be included in the sample. And if you don't know the probability, you will not be able to know how to weight the responses of this household to the total population level. Okay, so I really want to insist here, it is very important to collect the data in a way which is random, and this means that you know the probability of any unit to be included in the sample. There is a final phase, which is once you have when you have selected a household for the survey, do you interview one person or do you interview all persons in the household? So of course, if you interview all households, you will have more, better information. It will be much more qualitative. If you only have one person, it will be much easier, but this person may have difficulties in answering some question. In our case, surveys on use of internet include questions about the activities done on the internet. So imagine that you have a family with a father and 4 children, and the father is asked about the activities on the internet of each one of the children. I don't think that the father can answer about the variety of activities that his children are doing on the internet. So it will provide an answer, yes, but it will probably give an answer which is not really reflecting the reality. So using a proxy respondent, as it is called, a proxy respondent is one person answering for all, may not be the best solution in ICT household surveys. I will try to summarize these in a few graphs. So first we have the the country as a whole, which is then stratified. So for instance, in this case, we have considered 2 strata, the rural area and the urban area. So that would be the stratification phase. Then what we have is a partition in these enumeration areas or primary sampling units. So for instance, this urban area in yellow is broken down on a partition, which means that all the areas cover the whole surface and they do not intersect in several enumeration areas, ideally of a similar size. The same happens with the rural rural area. And then we have a first stage, which is a selection of certain of these enumeration areas. So for instance, in the urban area in yellow, we have selected 2 enumeration areas, and in the rural area, we have also selected 2 enumeration areas. So first, we need to, in order to extrapolate or to gross up the estimates that we will get from the sample to the population, we can think of a simplified formula, which is that in order to gross up the results of this area to the total population, we basically calculate a weight, which is the total population on the numerator divided by population of the enumeration area in the denominator. That's a way of grossing up from the enumeration area to the population. Okay? But then, in fact, we are doing a second stage of selection. So we are not collecting information from all households, but just from some of them, which are in red in this diagram. So for this one, imagine for this top one on the right, the weight would be like 5 times. So if we have 5 households and we have selected one out of these 5, the weight or the way to gross up the responses is by calculating the size or the number of households in the enumeration area divided by the number of households selected. If in this second area we had 3 households and we selected only 1, the weight is 3 divided by 1. So we have to gross up by 3. And this is something we calculate for everyone. So that means that every household has a different weight when we extrapolate to the enumeration area. Plus, this enumeration area has another weight to gross up to the population level. So at the end, the weight is a product, the multiplication of these 2 weights. Okay, this is very important because what you have is at the end a data file with individual and household responses, and each one of them has a different weight in order to be extrapolated. These weights are calculated by calculating usually sample size, but it has to be corrected by non-response, etc. It's a bit complicated, but in general, all statistical offices have practice on this. And we really insist it is very important that this is designed before you collect the data, so that you know the probability of selection and then the weights. Okay, remember, random sampling means that you know in advance how many households you will collect in each step. You know how many households are in each enumeration area. You know how many households are in each enumeration area in relation to the total population, and this is defined before you extract the sample. If you select a sample by non-random sampling, like a snowball sampling or any other way, these formulas are not correct. So you can, of course, apply them, but they will not be reflecting the real inference to the population. Okay. So why do we collect data from different types of units? We collect data from individuals on one topic and from households on another topic. I mean, my colleague Nathan will go into more detail on this later. But in general, what we have is indicators about the access to different devices, like access to telephones, access to TV, access to computer, and the breakdowns. These are measured at the household level. So indicators will be based on the proportion of households that have some type of access, while indicators about the use of internet or the use of computers, they are calculated at the individual level. So this is why questionnaires will have 2 parts, one for households, one for individuals. Okay, this is a list of indicators. You cannot see it probably in the slide because it's very small, but this is all in the manual. So remember, our sample has to have one definition of sampling selection for households. Then it needs to have a definition of how to select the individual within the household. And I recall for this kind of surveys, having a proxy respondent, like one individual responding for all, it's not probably the best solution. Good. So let's move a bit forward, because what I explained just now, it's valid for most household surveys. Let's go to the specific surveys on ICT access and use, and how we recommend to design the questionnaire. So the first thing we have to consider is whether we use, as I said before, a standalone survey or a survey specific to this topic, or if we use other surveys and we just include the questions. So this graph represents the latest information provided by my colleague Nathan. So from 114 countries that provide this data to ITU, roughly half of them have standalone surveys. So that means that they are already well tested in these countries, and we encourage you that if resources allow, you carry out at least once every 2-3 years this kind of standalone survey. Quarter of countries are using multi-purpose surveys, like the mixed surveys, which many countries implement, or even some other countries use labor force surveys or living condition surveys. So in general, like 40%, something like that, of countries are using other types of household surveys to include questions. So this is a good solution for keeping track of the main indicators. But if you really want to have detailed information about ICT access and use and its barriers, at some point it is important to carry out this kind of survey. Household expenditure surveys are not very much used because they are very expensive in general. They have a very, very high response burden. So it is not very best solution. And population enhancement censuses, while it is very good because it is exhaustive, it is not done every year. So it only happens every 10 years. And the technology changes so much and so fast that this frequency may not be optimal for ICT surveys. So as I said, standalone surveys, they would be very complete, and about 60 countries are using very similar questionnaires. So we encourage you to examine these potential examples of models. The use of different surveys is something that has to be checked country by country, depending on your multi-annual program of household surveys, on the availability of resources, and about the scope as well. So for instance, some countries use the mixed survey, the UNICEF mixed survey, but it only includes people of certain ages, because it is more addressed to health issues rather than ICT. So it will not probably cover all the population that we would like to have in the scope. Some policymakers or some people who are not so familiar with household surveys may think that big data can solve everything, and that if you are using big data, you will know everything you need. But this is of course true in some aspects. But if we are really thinking of digital inclusion surveys, understanding what is the profile and what are the barriers of those who are not connected or not using internet, these people do not leave traces on the big data, so they will not be covered by them. So while it is a very important source for complementing surveys, it will not satisfy the needs if you really want to have inclusion in your digital policies. So the ITU has proposed a model survey, which is in the manual. This model survey is largely comparable to other models. For instance, the European statistical system is using a survey which is compulsory for the countries, and they use I would say the same model in all of them. So this survey is very similar. and as I said before, it has been tested already in about 60 countries. So that means that if you want to design a survey for your country, you can use this as a model and then adapt it to your language, to the culture, to the form of data collection, to the current situation of ICT, and so on. The use of a model questionnaire helps a lot because you already have model questions, model indicators. And one thing that we are working on for the next edition of the manual is recommendation of the cognitive testing of the questionnaire. So the processes to test the questionnaire before it is launched on a large scale. The structure of the questionnaire, as I mentioned, is two-part. So it has a part on for households. So the household indicators on access will be collected from this first module, which includes data to classify the households. For instance, the composition, whether it has children or not, how many people, and so on. Also about the utilities. So for instance, we know that electricity is one of the basic utilities for ICT, but it is also important to know if the household has access to other devices, especially because the technology is converging, and at some point many of the devices will be providing similar services. So for instance, you can imagine that the TV at some point can also provide access to internet. Then a very important question is the barriers to access. Why the household does not have access to the ICT, whether it is because of lack of economic capacity, or lack of skills, or lack of interest, or even lack of connection in the area where they live. And then complementing this household module, there is an individual module which should be completed by every person age 5+ in the household. And this part includes questions about individual characteristics, age, gender, education level, occupation, so on, and includes questions about the use of phones, computers, and internet, and also about the barriers of use. I insist very much on the importance of understanding the barriers, because this is what digital policies can address. So understanding why people are not connected, or why people are not using, why households are not connected, why people are not using the internet, even if there is connection. I will not go into very much detail on the questionnaire structure, but just to remind you, there is a section on household characteristics, a section about the access to information communication technologies at the level of households, so radios, television, phones, by types of phones, computer, internet, and so on, and always the barriers. In parentheses, you have the reference to the indicators. HH1 to HH23 are the names we give to the indicators which are considered the most important ones on access and use by household individuals. This is a detail in the manual. Then we have a section on individual characteristics to be able to produce the breakdowns. Some of them are very difficult. For instance, if we want to have breakdowns of ICT use indicators by disability status, probably in the sample you have either to oversample disabled population, or maybe they will not appear as frequent as you need for having good estimates at the desired standard error level. And then we have the other indicators about the individual use of ICT, which includes use of phones, computers, internet, and again, the barriers to the reasons for not using the internet. Okay, these indicators are defined in the manual. I will not go through them. I mentioned at the beginning how important it is to train the interviewers. Why? Because there are some concepts which may be difficult to understand by respondents. So for instance, what is a computer? So years ago, a computer was very easy to identify. Now a computer, we have a fixed computer, we have a laptop, we have tablets, so things are changing. Then at some point we'll have our fridge connected to the internet and providing probably more functionalities than computers 20 years ago. So what is a computer is changing, and this is revised periodically. The same happens with the types of the technologies of access to internet. So right now, many countries are deploying 5G technologies. So explaining the different technologies to the respondent may be difficult. So this is something that you have to consider when training the interviewers in identifying this. The same in the question relating to use of internet. Some countries, in particular Brazil, has done studies about what they call the non-aware users of internet. So responded that say that they use Facebook, but they do not use the internet, while Facebook needs internet to work. So these are called the non-aware use of internet, and this is usually corrected by probing questions or by validating the data. Technology are also changing in terms of cellular telephones. So now we know that we can call our mom from our watch because it is connected to the telephone. So is that a telephone or not? I mean, things will have to be defined. So all this is difficult and has to be included in the training to the interviewers. To try to finalize, I would like to explain a bit about the data collection techniques. So the best is always to have a face-to-face in terms of the collection of data. It gets higher response rates. It can provide for clarification of questions, but it is very expensive. It is time consuming. If the interviewer is not well trained, he or she can introduce bias, and it can be very hard in case of remote areas to move the interviewers there. Telephone surveys are faster, are cheaper, but it is not easy to find the number that has to be called. So there is no listing of mobile phones in general. Households that do not have phones will be excluded from the design, so they will have a zero probability of being included in sample. It gets lower response rates, and it is limited for simple questions. So in my experience, telephone-assisted interviews for this kind of surveys do not work very well. Self-enumeration using paper questionnaires is a good solution. The respondents can take their time to answer, but then it requires data entry. It is not providing for a clarification of concepts, so it is not really the most adequate way of collecting data for this survey. And internet-based surveys, they can be used, but of course they will be only used by those who have not only access to internet, but certain skills to answer the questions. So these may have biases. So in general, what statistical offices do is a combination of all these data collection techniques. So some households will be visited, some households will probably answer by phone, some answers will be allowed to send their answers via internet, etc. So this is something that should be harmonized with other practices in household surveys, but remember that internet-based surveys or telephone surveys will have an inherent bias in this kind of survey because they are precisely trying to measure the ICT use and skills and barriers. So it will not be the same as for other surveys. So with this, I would like to finish. I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues, and I remain available for any questions. Thank you very much. Nathan, back to you.
Thank you, De Luis. Give me just a moment. I'll share my screen here. Okay, thank you. So I will just talk for a few minutes about how once we have conducted the survey, how we can calculate these household indicators. So there's a few concepts to go over. The first is on converting questions to indicators. So this is kind of recoding. You might have a question, one that we show here, for example, have you ever used the internet? And the answer is yes or no, but the indicator is actually internet use in the last 3 months. Often there will be a sub-indicator, question 1A in this case, that we ask the people who do use the internet and when was the last time they used the internet. So the reported data we would have is from the response 1, 2, 3, or 4 in this question 1A. And you can see we get an example of 3 people, A, person B, person C. And we see that while all 3 of them have used the internet ever, person A was more than 3 months ago, and therefore they do not count in this recoding. Another way that indicator questions might be needed to be recoded to indicators is when a indicator is broken down into multiple questions. So we have an indicator, for example, on taking measures to protect privacy on your device, account, or app. This is not something that necessarily is recommended to ask directly to a person because maybe they would interpret it different ways. So often a country might break this down in a survey into maybe 4 questions here. So in this case, we would say that any person who has responded yes to any of these 4 questions has done this, is counted as having done this indicator. So again, we see person A has done none, person B has done 2 of these, person C has done 4, and so therefore person B and C are counted as having taken measures to protect privacy. Jose touched a lot on weighting, and so this is an extremely important factor. We really should not be using raw data directly. We do sometimes receive data from countries with raw data, and we are not able to publish this because we don't know what kind of bias might exist in how the survey was conducted. There's a lot of factors that are missing if we're looking just at the raw data. Specifically, there's kind of 2 main factors that go into weighting. First is on the sample design. This is what Jose was discussing earlier, is that we have clustering or stratification that countries will often use to either increase precision and also maybe decrease the cost of administrating the survey. And so typically this implies unequal probability of selection. That means very unequal that 2 clusters will be exactly the same population, or that there's a lot of different factors that will almost certainly imply different probability of selection. After the survey, when you look at the results, you often have a couple of different sources of bias. One is in who responds to the surveys. You often have certain characteristics of people who might respond that you need to protect for. Other things that you might have important socioeconomic markers that are unknown from sampling frame. This is something that we adjust for post-stratification often. This is aligning with population parameters. A very simple example is that, say, your sample comes back as 70% men when you know that the population is 50% men. So there would need to be a reweighting of your results to reflect this. Going through a very quick simplified example, say we have 9 individuals that we're sampling from an in-scope population of 900. Therefore, you might expect that the base probability of selection is 1%, so 9 over 900. However, for different reasons, we might know already that there are 3 regions in this population, and they have very different characteristics. So we create strata to look at each of these different regions. So in this case, we'll select 3 from each of the 3 regions. This is a very simple stratified design. And you'll notice that in the column here, we see that the population of the regions is unequal. And this means that there's a different probability of selection for each region. 3 out of 100 for those in region X, down to 3 out of 600 in the region Z. So what this means when you're calculating the weight, as Jose described, is the inverse of the probability of selection. So you're taking the population of the stratum and dividing by the sample size of the stratum. And we see that person C is overrepresented. They have a higher probability of collection, therefore they have a lower sample weight. And while person H is underrepresented and will contribute more to the survey results, their weight will be 200, so 600 divided by 3. Now, just an important note here is that this is a very simplified example. It doesn't consider even the sample design that Jose Luis had described, this one stage. We also are not considering here any non-response adjustments or any post-stratification adjustments as well. So this is the kind of the most basic level of weighting that we would see. And almost certainly in any survey, we would see different other factors added into these weights. And now looking at how this is used in practice calculating an indicator, we might have a question, do you own a mobile phone? And people in our survey might answer yes or no, yes for 1, 0 for no. The way that we calculate estimate the number of people who do own a mobile phone in the population is by taking a cross product. And you multiply the sampling weight of each person against yes or no, do they own a mobile phone? The person A, yes, they get 33. Person B, no, 0. Person G, yes, so they get 200. And if you sum these up, you have an estimation of 700 persons out of the 900 own a mobile phone. And 700 divided by 900, you get to 78%. Now we see already that this can differ greatly from the raw calculation. If you were to have just taken the 5 out of 9, you'd have a very different result. A last factor, which is related to the two previous, is how we report by socioeconomic group. We will need to, in this case, filter by the group, and we do that by using the results of background questions that were asked earlier in the survey. And we use these same individual weights that we used before. So this question, what is your gender, would be used as a filter. And looking at the same theoretical sample that we have, maybe 4 of the 9 are men, and so we just filter out the others and calculate in the same exact way as before. And so when you sum those who own a mobile phone, it comes to 300 divided by the total population of 333, we get 90%. And again, this can differ greatly from what you would get from a raw calculation. Now, an important note, and this is kind of a bad example in some ways, is because when we do a lot of the filtering, you can filter on many different background variables. You might have insufficient sample sizes. If you have below a certain level, I mean, it might be recommended to not report these data. So it's important to calculate the standard errors as you're going along, or if you have questions about privacy as well, this is a place to be careful a little bit. So to summarize, the main thing we want to get across is that raw data require processing. We cannot accept simple raw data to estimate for a population what the survey results are. So to align with indicator definitions, we're going to need to recode data. To adjust for sample design and post-survey observations, weighting is really essential. And then the last thing is when we're reporting on socioeconomic groups, we may need some manipulation and filtering of the data. Yeah, so just thank you all for joining the session today. Another reminder that we will be posting all the presentations on the event website. We appreciate your participation. Discussion does not need to end here, so we encourage you to follow up with us if you have any further questions on any of these topics.